Note the disclaimer. A brief message here. This video is not for the faint of heart. Heavy topics will be discussed.
Arthur Millshadowing.
Is that supposed to be a joke? Did anyone laugh at that? And it's just an Easter egg, as no salesmen actually die in this film.
Late 90s, early aughts horror film has an and or also starring Tony Todd credit cliche.
Okay, how is this a sin of the movie? Tony Todd is awesome. Mind you, I'm not as knowledgeable with his work as I've only seen this series of films, and heard of his appearance in Candyman, but even so, as much as attempting to sin the late great Tony Todd, that's just low, even for you.
You gotta leave that on. Yeah, it's like, tell you made the last flight without the plane crashing or anything.
Whether your mom takes it off here or someone with the airline takes it off there, it doesn't matter. This tag is making no more flights.
While I do agree that normally the tag would be ripped off, the idea was that either Alex's father, Kenneth, was doing this for a while and his son picked up that habit, or because he was slightly new to flying and possibly quite nervous about it, Ken probably just said that to mess with him.
Every time I set my alarm to wake me up at 1:80, I always end up selecting AM and not PM.
Sinning an awesome transition from clock to flight timetable? All for a joke that no one laughed at?
Also, look, movie, you could have easily just made the flight number 145 or something, and you could still have this neat transition to the airport. But because you've changed the clock to an impossible time, now you're making me wonder if the spirits in charge of this final destination are actually giving weird clues to its victims, which, why would they do that?
Yes, this is to signify that greater forces are at work here.
Hey, Hitchcock.
Having as obvious of an Easter egg as naming a character Hitchcock in your horror film. And yeah, I caught the teacher's name as Val Lewton. Here, have to.
There's also Agent Schreck, named after Max Schreck. Alex Browning's last name is derived from Todd Browning. Agent Wayne comes from Robert Wayne, and many more examples. Heck, it even happens in the other movies, so how is that supposed to be a sin?
Roll credits.
I did admittedly miss this on the first time watching it, but after a few rewatches I caught it. But why does it always have to be roll credits every single time the name of the movie is uttered or shown?
September 25, 9:25. Your birthday is the same as your departure time.
People who notice things.
Funny you didn't sin this for coincidence.
Man, things sure have changed for Allie Larder in just a couple of minutes. Earlier, she was wearing a sweater and reading Tropic of Cancer. Since then, she shed the sweater, added another book, and is listening to a Walkman and has bought coffee. You'd think she'd simply wait until she got to the waiting area to pull out all this new stuff, but the movie's got to find a way to drop another clue of their impending doom somehow.
You could have just condensed the sin by saying circumstances lead to foreshadowing. Mostly because somebody doesn't understand the passage of time here.
You gotta go torque a wicked cable, and then right after you, like directly after you, walks in Krista or Blake.
Why is Alex concerned about Krista or Blake? He's catching the eye of Clear, and yeah, her name is Clear, but that's Allie f***ing Larder.
Todd was the one concerned about Krista and Blake, because of the bad stench from the toilets of the plane.
Alex, let's go take a shit. So why don't you take a shit by yourself? No, dude. We're about to board a 7-hour flight. The toilets in coach are barely ventilated closets, all right, if that. Now let's say halfway through the flight, right? Your body wants that airplane food out. You gotta go torque a wicked cable, and then right after you, like directly after you, walks in Krista or Blake. Dude, do you want them to associate you with that watery sting in their eye, that reflexive gag at the back of their throat?
Alex doesn't care all that much, and he didn't even notice Clear was looking at him after seeing Diana's photo.
That's a good sign. Younger the better to be a f***ed up guy to take down this plane.
I think it's kind of f***ed up how many of these kids are concerned or obsessed with the idea of the plane crashing, and then it actually does. And by f***ed up, I mean convenient and sinful.
And there's the convenient sin we were missing. Nah, but in all seriousness, Alex is the only one concerned about it, and Clear is picking up on his nervousness. George here, in his own f***ed up way, is trying to reassure Alex, but clearly it doesn't seem to be working.
Yes, switch seats with Krista.
Oh, God. I would, but I got a bladder. thing.
Todd says no to this because he wants one of these girls to sit next to him. But there are 3 seats here, and the only person who hasn't made it on the plane yet is Billy Hitchcock, who eventually sits in one of the middle rows. So why can't they all sit there? Even if there's a missing third person they'd have to negotiate and switch with, that's not a problem when they ask Alex if he can switch seats. So either these 2 girls need an empty seat for some reason, or Todd somehow didn't think to tell them they could all sit together without coming up with this shitty bladder problem issue.
They probably did this because the girls didn't want to sit next to Todd. Possibly because he has the charm of a flounder and a pair of sunglasses. So they ask Alex because Krista's assigned seat was next to Alex's. So it made sense that if Todd didn't want to switch seats with Krista, they'd ask Alex to switch with Blake.
You know, because of you, I gotta sit here and watch f***ing Stuart Little.
Why is that the only option? I'm glad this plane goes down. And yeah, there's a baby, but that baby would prefer the plane crash over Stuart Little.
I'm sure there were other movie options, Jeremy, but that isn't a sin of this movie.
Why is Krista back up here across from Miss Luton again? She should be in the back of the plane where she took Alex's seat.
First off, Krista is up the back of the plane. Secondly, Blake is the only one who swapped seats with Alex. Thirdly, Luton didn't say Krista here. I can't tell whose name she actually screamed, but it definitely wasn't Krista. Even with the subtitles, I couldn't tell you.
What an asshole.
I'm sorry, but how in the fresh hell does falling make you an arsehole? Wouldn't he need an apple with that as well? Also the laugh.
It's not a joke! It's not a joke! Alex, take it easy. It's not a joke. Sit down, bro.
Why the f*** does Jack McPhee here take so much interest in going after Alex? Is it because the movie needs to fill its Dawson's Creek screen time quota?
I don't see any James Van Der Beek here, so that joke was useless. But Carter ends up going after Alex because he's causing a ruckus in the plane, and Carter, being the violence first, ask questions later type, wants him to shut up and sit back down, until eventually volunteering to remove him.
No one gets back on board.
No one gets back on board. You haven't even heard the whole story yet, and you're ready to kick a bunch of passengers off who weren't even part of the problem? But hey, you got the cast of the movie you wanted off the plane, so good for you guys.
Oh dear God, that's the second time in 3 minutes you've laughed like that in this video. Also, the reason for this ejection is because Luton and Murnau wanted to try and de-escalate the situation while Terry and Billy just got mixed in for no apparent reason. However, with Alex and Carter coming to blows, there's no reason for them to get back on board. They might have also become suspicious of Alex's warning about the plane exploding, because they think he planted a bomb there, and they may have tried to contact the police. Mind you, this is pre-Patriot Act, so he's not going to be on the way to Guantanamo Bay, but he will still get a talking to from the feds.
Larry's the one making sure Cruel Intentions 3 here doesn't fight Wild America, but as soon as he leaves, they just stay seated?
Because there are 2 security guards watching them, and Terry is trying to calm Carter down, while Todd is trying to understand what's going on with Alex.
The airline's not taking this very well. They'll let one of us back on. The rest of us can take an 11:10 flight.
Where did Ms. Luton get the second flight info from? The officer just told her that one of them could go on the current flight, and that's it. He said nothing about a second flight.
Most likely she was given that information while we saw Carter trying to punch up Alex again, or she saw it on the status board and made the choice for the rest of whoever stayed behind to catch that flight instead.
Everyone makes such a big deal about not being on this plane when they've already been told they can get on another plane that lands 3 hours later. And yes, we sinned the idea they'd even have knowledge of that, but since they apparently do, here's another sin.
First off, she said 11:10 p.m. after the original flight's departure time was supposed to be 9:25 p.m. That is 1 hour and 45 minutes away, not 3 hours. Secondly, Carter and Billy are the only ones making a stink about it. While Terry is staying quiet, Clear isn't even getting involved, Luton is trying to help calm Alex, and Todd is chewing out Carter for mocking him about the premonition. Also, this would be double dipping since you sinned this knowledge in the previous sin, so you're getting an extra one here.
I don't think it was gonna happen.
If that's the case, Alex, then why did you really get off the plane?
Ooh, what a gotcha that is. Alex was kicked off the plane, dude. Even if he can't remember, I'll remember for you. Sure, he made it where they had no choice but to kick him off, but he didn't just leave the plane.
Jeremy yells at the screen cliche.
Amongst the travelers, a class of 40 students and 4 teachers.
Wait, there were supposed to be 4 teachers on that flight? But Miss Luton was worried that the students would be flying to Paris without any supervision when she heartlessly sent Larry to his death a minute ago. There were at least 2 other teachers on board.
That is admittedly something I've never been able to work out, especially having rewatched this series several times since January last year. The news report claims 40 students and 4 teachers, yet when we get to the memorial statue, they mention 39 members of the school, died in the plane crash, with 7 survivors walking off, which means that the total number would have had to have been around 46, while the news report mentions a total of Mount Abraham attendees as being 44, with 4 of them being teachers. This is probably the longest explanation I've ever had to go to for a sin removal, but I just had to get that off my chest. And yes, he goes on to explain this in the next sin, but I figured I'd save you the trouble.
Ecclesiastes tells us.
Reading from Ecclesiastes, the book nobody understands why it was even included in the Bible.
Okay, I'm not religious by any standards, but I have been to a Christian school, and even I could tell that a lot of the stories in the Bible had to be worth telling at some point. Between Job, Timothy, Exodus, Jeremiah, Genesis, and Corinthians, lots of people around the time of Adam and Eve, all the way up to Jesus' crucifixion and revival, had a lot of their own stories which could be considered inspirational, even the lesser-known ones.
I asked how Cynthia pastor. Will she say no?
The fact that this asshat got to survive over a baby is reason enough to not believe there is a just God.
Agnostics. Oh, damn, that's a sin on me then.
Listen, I don't want you to take this the wrong way, man, but I miss you, you know.
The year 2000, when you had to make sure your buddy knew that you weren't gay before you said something like this.
Well, it wasn't as accepting of a society as it is now, but still, it was better than being in the olden days.
The movie is at least 3% young men sitting on toilets, and that is at least 7% too much.
Jeremy doesn't know shit about percentages.
Are Alex's parents okay with this obsession he clearly now has with figuring out what happened? Because this can't be healthy. And while many might argue that death is the main villain in these films, I'm thinking, at least in this one, it could be Ken and Barbara Browning. I mean, do you remember how they dropped off clear so far away from her front door in the rain? I don't need apples with bites taken out of them to know the Brownings are assholes.
Where the hell are you getting that from? Now, I didn't cover it because I didn't deem it that important, but clearly, Clea would have said to stop at the driveway because she might not want people seeing that she lives alone. And as for the research, they probably know that if he doesn't at least try to understand how it happened, he won't be able to have some form of closure over the accident.
Penis piercing.
Why did you have to point this out?
When Todd plugs in the radio, it's playing John Denver's Rocky Mountain High, and he's freaked out about it enough to unplug it. But when Alex brought it up in the bathroom stalls earlier, he didn't give 2 shits about. Oh wait, maybe he did.
That's because he picked up on Alex's nerves about it, and since he now attributes the song to the plane explosion, much like Alex did, he didn't want to hear it anymore. Also, 5 sins for singing Rocky Mountain High. I hope you don't do this for the other film's Songs of Death.
Alex is browsing a penthouse, then a fucking owl flies up to his window. Then he throws the penthouse at the owl, and the fan shreds some of the magazine. And somehow the fan cuts a page so perfectly that one of the pieces lands on Alex's legs that says Todd. This shit is more random than the stuff people have to do to travel through the multiverse and everything everywhere all at once.
Jeremy points out things on the screen cliché, and fails to take into account the supernatural forces at work in this movie.
Also, to be fair, Todd probably needed a doc. His parents didn't even love him enough to give his name a second D.
I was just going to give him a Jeremy makes a lewd joke cliché sin and be done with it, but I think it's better to point out that Jeremy thinks single D Todds don't exist. And with that being the case, I bet Todd Browning, among others, would like to have a word with him.
Todd is holding clothes in his left hand before he slips, and when it cuts to the shot behind him, he's no longer holding the clothes.
I'm going to stop you right there, because you say he didn't drop them, but the shot you show when you say that actually shows the clothes on the floor. So yes, he did drop them, Jer.
Also, I don't do physics often, but when I do, I will note that literal Grim Reaper or no literal Grim Reaper, all of this death is bullshit.
Yeah, physics doesn't apply in a world where death is trying to get even. But even if it did, the idea here is that Todd slipped into the clothesline, which wrapped around his neck. He couldn't reach the scissors, and nor could he stand up due to how slippery the tub is.
Oh yeah, death. You probably should make sure you clean up all the evidence before anyone comes in. You'd be the prime suspect in this case, and you're already on your 2nd strike.
This, you may have a point on. It's very odd that this is the only instance in any of the 6 movies now in which we see death cleaning up the evidence here. But since death can't be prosecuted either way, I'd say this was ridiculous, so I will neither add or remove a sin here.
Maybe call Todd's house instead of just showing up, since pretty much everyone in town is f***ing terrified of you right now. Read the room, Alex.
Who's to say he didn't already try that? I mean, we know that his dad was asleep, and that we don't know of his mother until later, but there was also the likelihood that they'd screen the call as soon as they realised it was Alex anyway, since Todd had been barred from communicating with him. so the only other option would have been to go there and check for himself.
Get out of here.
What the f*** is Clear doing there? How would she have known anything was afoot at the Wagner residence? She's gonna give some I feel what Alex feels excuse later, but yeah, I'm not convinced. I don't think she thinks clearly enough to make clear decisions such as these.
So you ask why she's there, despite knowing that she tells us and Alex later? Dude, she's an empath. Empaths usually feel other people's emotions, whether they be good or bad, and experience them as their own. In this case, Alex's heightened sense of fear and worry made her realise that he's going to try and check on Todd since he cares about his best friend. There's also the idea that since she knows the FBI doesn't investigate teen suicides unless there was something bigger that happened beforehand, there was probably more to the plane crash mystery than they initially expected.
Didn't you see it?
Not technically, but my whack material got torn up by the fan and Todd was written on the strip of paper that blew back onto my lap. And I could have called and warned you and maybe you would have saved your son's life, but I decided I would just run to your house and make everything super weird because that's how I roll.
Again, Mr. Wagner might have been screening any calls from the Browning residence. Plus, he's talking about Todd's mental state, because Todd survived the plane crash while his brother George died, leading him to assume depression and survivor's guilt. Seeing Todd dead in his bathtub made Mr. Wagner believe that Todd took his own life because he couldn't take the guilt and blames Alex for causing it. It's amazing how you can cut context out of movies, ask irrelevant questions, and make empty platitudes when the explanation can come from whatever dialogue you guys cut out.
Almost autumn.
It's only the end of June.
Focus even now, just 1 week into summer, you can almost feel autumn coming. I like being able to see the future.
That was a really long and convoluted way to get to that observation. I'm beginning to think this whole script was written by a Rube Goldberg machine.
Actually, it was a rejected X-Files script worked into a full-length feature film. Sure, it may sound ridiculous, but do we care? No! And a script written by a Rube Goldberg machine actually sounds awesome. Way better than AI.
Why were you there last night?
Man, he sure got over Todd's death in a matter of no time, didn't he? This was Alex's best friend.
No, he's not over his friend's death, because he talks about it with Clea, and they go see his body at the funeral home afterwards.
I know because I can still feel you. That's why I was there last night.
Damn, maybe she has powers too. I'm sure this will be brought up again and have importance to the plot later, and they won't forget about this at all.
Sounds like you're saying you're disappointed that Clea's abilities weren't properly explored. But like I said, she's an empath, and this scene explains how she knew about Alex's feelings and why she was at Todd's place, and you're just glossing over it.
How the f*** did you guys know there was a stained glass access door on the top of the roof? You guys visit this mortuary often?
Alex? No. Clea? Possible. She even says doing something she's not supposed to gives her a rush.
The red light that we stop at or run. The people we have sex with or won't with us.
Whoa, you went from traffic light to sex pretty quickly, didn't you? Fan of David Cronenberg's Crash, I see.
He was making an analogy that appealed to teenagers. And the movie mentioned doesn't even make sense since Crash was about a guy who... You know what? I'm not even going to discuss this movie because it isn't the sin of Final Destination. Stick to the assignment, Jeremy.
Does that mean if you figure out the design, you can cheat death?
You've already done that by walking off the plane.
Again, he was kicked off, but I'm having trouble figuring out Death's motives here since people regularly cheat Death all the time and go on living long, happy lives.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to continue the rest of Jeremy's dialogue. The point here is that Death in this franchise tries to get even with people, whether it's visionaries like Alex or daredevils like Evel Knievel. The problem is in this franchise, they're supposed to die in the accident they avoided, so Death is correcting the mistakes. A plane crash is typically something you don't survive from unless you get lucky, and most of the other accidents in this franchise can't be walked away from. Also, yes, Alex was kicked off of the plane, but if Carter hadn't started the fight, he would have most likely tried to make a run for it anyway.
But remember, the risk of cheating the plan, of disrespecting the design, could incite a fury that could terrorize even the Grim Reaper.
I thought it was the Grim Reaper you were talking about, Mr. Bloodworth. I guess he's talking about God? But if that's the case, didn't God give Alex his weird warlock power? I'm very confused.
Bloodworth here is talking about the Grim Reaper terrorizing even himself with his own fury, by cheating the design and living when you were supposed to die. As for the entity that gave Alex his power, that is still up for debate.
And you don't even want to f*** with that, Mac Daddy.
The idea that Candyman will be intimidated by the Grim Reaper enough to refer to him as a Mac Daddy you don't want to fuck with is disappointing.
No. Bad Jeremy. Sinning this line.
Alex gets the tingles when he sees a bus's reflection in the window, but it's not the same kind of clue he's been given throughout the movie. Nothing about Terry, who's going to die next, shows up. Like, not even Steelers legend Terry Bradshaw comes out of nowhere to give Alex a hint.
Because he doesn't know the order yet. He was just given a clue about what might kill the next person. How was anyone supposed to know it was Terry since the smash comes out of nowhere? And why the hell would Terry Bradshaw pop up in this movie?
Wow, f***ing everybody except Miss Luton is in the area right now for maximum coincidence. Oops, spoke too soon.
Jeremy points things out on the screen cliché.
And you can just drop f***ing dead.
Officer, I would like to report this bus driver for being a drunken maniac running over a girl who was clearly in the street for I definitely have time to break for her amounts of time.
Okay, you gotta giggle out of me.
Also, there was absolutely no indication a bus was coming until it just showed up out of nowhere.
You mean the sin 2 minutes and 26 seconds before this, you bloody liar?
Also, honorary sin for a projectionist we knew back in the day who used to crank the volume past 100 decibels during this bus scene.
Oh, is that why you're partially deaf?
Even more also! Check out this woman in the background as Alex and Carter look on in stunned, bloodied disbelief at what they just witnessed.
He's talking about Clear here. She turned her head because she didn't want to see the aftermath of what just happened. And no, I'm not going to continue the rest of this sin, because I just explained that this is Clear, not a waitress.
Did this movie just cut from Terry being obliterated by a bus and her blood on everyone's faces to Alex calmly enjoying a drink with an antacid in it? Because it did, and what the f*** movie?
That's because the crew behind this movie added 40 extra seconds of footage due to the fact that test screen audiences took so long to relax after the hit that they'd missed the next line of dialogue. Even if you don't believe me, you might believe producer Craig Perry.
The audiences for the first few previews went so bananas for that moment that we had to add length to the shot of the Alka-Seltzer in the glass afterwards, just for them to sort of like get their sea legs and get their nerves settled down so they could listen to the dialogue in the next scene. It was one of the most gratifying moments I've ever had making movies.
It's clear. Again.
I have yet to come to terms with the fact that Ali Larter's name is fucking Clear. Her parents called her Clear. Clear Rivers, no less.
And I have yet to come to terms with the fact that this is a sin.
The news broadcast then shows the path of the spark through the fuel line and concludes that it led to the fuel pump, causing the explosion. In the next shot, Alex is putting a piece of paper over the diagram, which is mysteriously changed to completely different seats with a different fuel line path.
Nothing to see here, folks. Just Jeremy explaining plot points again. Oh, wait. He misunderstood the seating layout there.
Also, this diagram of how the explosion would have killed everyone and in what order, which helps Alex figure everything out, is the most insane use of news position in a movie ever.
So, are you making out that this information, which likely came from the black box recordings, was an unnecessary addition to the movie? How else do you expect Alex to work out the order? Just guess? Or wait until the third person? Because if so, then we'd just be making guesses as to who will be next, along with Alex, and while the little mystery is fun, this is about saving lives.
Die in the order they would have died.
A fuel line path does not prove who would have died first, and most of these people would have likely died instantaneously.
I'm going to stop you right there. So, we're ignoring the fact that Todd died first, then Terry, and now, thanks to the fire line, we know that it travels over to Miss Luton, then Carter, then Billy, then Clear, and finally Alex? Even if they died instantaneously, what we see is Todd getting hit by a radio, Terry most likely getting splattered on the walls along with the flight attendant, and then the fire travels its way up the cabin towards Alex like we saw in the premonition, meaning knowing the order is essential to work out how to prevent it.
Just looking at my own front yard makes me feel nothing but fear.
And Alex will conveniently be creeping around outside Miss Luton's window as soon as she looks, because horror movie.
Much like with Mr. Wagner, Miss Luton thinks Alex is responsible for what happened with the plane and doesn't want to see him anymore.
Miss Luton.
Don't talk to me, you scared the hell out of me.
Of course seeing him there is going to freak her out. I do of course reckon the best idea is for her to go to therapy, but that's neither here nor there.
Mom's favorite.
Oh, come on!
Sinning Rocky Mountain High. Again.
I'm not going Dahmer on you guys.
Whoa. Who the f*** was thinking anything about Jeffrey goddamn Dahmer during any of this?
The assumption that Alex might be a serial killer, and Dahmer was one of the most well-known.
First your friend Todd,
Then Terry Chaney while you were at the scene.
But there's zero chance Alex killed either Todd or Terry. Everyone else thinks Todd killed himself and Alex wasn't at the house regardless. And there are several witnesses that can prove Alex wasn't driving when that coked up bus driver hit Terry. I realize this has to appear strange to these two agents, but there's no way they can think Alex has shit to do with the deaths. They're wasting a lot of time questioning Alex if they actually think there's someone else involved.
You would be correct here, but the agents do have reason to suspect Alex, as he was one of the 7 survivors of the Flight 180 explosion, all because of a vision, and the survivors started to die in weird events. Plus, they arrived on instructions from Valerie Luton, who called the cops on Alex because he was hanging out in her driveway.
Now, can you promise me that no one else is going to die?
No, I can't. As long as I'm in here, it's out of my control. I'm sorry.
Okay. Go ahead. Get out of here.
This works.
They were dubious, sure, but he said himself several times that he's trying to break the pattern and cheat the design. They mostly let him out on the idea that he's slightly crazy, not that he's right.
If death has this much control over physical objects, why all this f***ing around with cracking mugs and hoping water drips to seep into a computer later? Make a knife float in the air and stab Miss Luton if you need her dead. Or just blow the house up. Both of these things happen eventually anyways.
It's because first, she pulled a total Boston move and dumped her tea, swapping it out for a beverage that was colder, hence the sudden change in temperature cracking the mug. Next, Death can't just pick up a knife and stab Luton in the back. That ruins the illusion of it being supernatural. Finally, the stabbing and the house explosion seem to be to your point, but you still sin it anyway.
Water seeps down into a computer that is not turned on, and yet it causes this monitor to smoke and explode, sending a shard of glass into Miss Luton's neck.
Jeremy points things out on the screen cliché.
Okay, now we're just making huge stretches to give Alex clues in this movie. A burning pile of leaves?
He takes this clue to mean a house fire, and since that happens later when Luton's vodka bottle causes the kitchen to explode, I'd say that clue was pretty spot on. So too was the warning about Todd and the bus reflection. So, come on man, just suspend your disbelief a little.
No man, don't do that! Haven't you ever seen North by Northwest? Well, probably not, but you have a poster of Pecker in your room, so it wasn't a huge ask.
Jeremy yells at the screen cliché, arbitrary movie reference, failing to realise that Alex's flawed character. He can't make intelligent decisions when he's stressed out like this, hence why he screamed at the top of his lungs about the plane exploding, picked a fight with Carter in the airport terminal after being ejected from the plane, and a few other mistakes he makes in the movie. Every character in this film, nay, this franchise, is going to have flaws. There is no perfect character in this movie series.
Billy once again shows up out of nowhere at the same time all this shit goes down, continuing the theme that all the survivors are connected.
The idea was to escalate the conflict. Like I said in the previous video, conflict happens for a reason. Billy seeing the house explosion and Alex running away from it made Billy a witness to the murder of Miss Luton, and convinces the FBI that Alex is causing all of this, thus leading to Billy and Alex arguing about it in Carter's car later. If Billy wasn't there, the FBI would most likely be combing the scene for longer than they thought, and come to the conclusion on their own that Alex did this based on the fingerprints on the knife.
Carter, you dick!
Does Carter just always plan sudden stops in his car to wherever Billy is riding his bike?
No, because Carter didn't think Billy would show up in front of him like that. Not that it would have mattered anyway, considering Carter is a one-track-minded bully, and Billy had endured the brunt of it for the longest time.
Why'd you want us to meet you here anyway, huh?
Because they're watching me. See if I go to Alex.
But won't they be watching you getting into Carter's car and then just follow him to Alex?
Again, no. Because unlike Alex, they don't know that Carter is next on the list, and Claire has been trying to avoid the agents after they chatted with her in her driveway.
He could be anywhere from here to a mile down the road.
But mostly he'll be here. Like, right here. It's almost too easy. But also, why did Claire know that Alex would be at the beach? I don't remember anything about him being here before or saying he liked coming to the beach, and definitely didn't tell anyone he'd be here tonight.
Once again, Claire is an empath. She knows that Alex isn't in the best frame of mind at this point, but of course no one will believe her, so she's just leaving it vague for Carter and Billy. Also, I let two sins play here, because Jeremy fails to realise that despite no mention of going to a beach, Alex just wanted the time to himself for a while, as well as the fact that this beach was clearly an accident recovery zone from where rescue workers pulled out a few chunks of the Flight 180 wreckage. hence why the movie showed you a sign that said it was closed to the public.
When I was a kid, like 6 or 7.
Skip!
So, backstory into how Clea became the way she did, and her experiences with death isn't interesting to you? And yet you were asking questions about it earlier? To quote Mr. Potato Head, did you take stupid pills this morning?
They blame me for Todd, they blame me for her, they blame me for the fucking plane crash.
Well, no, they very specifically told you that they don't blame you for the plane crash. It's all the stuff after that they blame you for.
It's likely that Wayne and Shrek only said that to soften the blow of potential jail time that Alex may face. Or Alex just didn't believe them after he said that.
This train hits a car, and for the next minute it will speed along like nothing happened, never stopping after hitting that car. Even if it takes a train a while to slow down, it never slows down, which ultimately leads to Billy's death.
Cool, but can you please explain why this is a sin? And no, I'm not going to finish it because he asks a random question afterwards.
I saw it! I saw the belt!
It didn't really tell you shit, though. None of these clues are really all that helpful.
So, Alex seeing all these signs are bullshit because you say so? Even though they were all correct in one way or another? What in the world are you smoking?
I saw the seatbelt! I knew it would rip! That's how I saved him, just like the plane.
Yeah, even if I buy this, and I'm having a hard time doing so, I don't understand why you then didn't get a premonition about Billy's head getting lopped off his body right after that.
Okay, so you finally admit that you don't understand how the supernatural forces in this movie work. Well, if that's the case, can you stop sinning them for just like 10 minutes? And as for the mention about Billy's head, my bet is that the ripped belt was for Carter, and the train reflection was more so to signal Billy's impending doom, even after it plowed through Carter's Chevy.
Also, being this gratified that your theory was correct after seeing your classmate get decapitated.
You must have missed the bit where he was panicking with Carter and Clea when it happened. And no, this doesn't prove a theory right, he only just seemed to think about it after pulling Carter away from the tracks and watching Billy get guillotined.
Baby, you're losing it, okay?
Did we miss the start of a romantic relationship for Alex and Clea? Because why is she calling him baby? Have they been dating behind our backs this whole time?
Not exactly. For one, we have the cafe scene before Terry became a decorative red splotch on the road. And for another, and I know the deleted scenes don't count, but they did have relations on the beach after they talked about Alex struggling with everything.
No one will be seated as Alex opens up a metal can of pudding and eats it.
Interestingly enough, that was actually mashed up bananas, because what was initially inside the tin was tuna, almost like cat food, and it nearly made Devon Sawa sick, so they had to change it up a little so that it was at least somewhat palatable.
Tetanus. Nice one.
Did Alex really think death would get him back with tetanus?
Well, we know death doesn't like the slow and gentle approach, but Alex didn't know that at the time, so he may very well have done. And just so you know, I'm not letting you get away with that f***ing laugh.
But I got this cabin rigged to beat you now!
I guess it's possible that Alex doesn't know how far over the line death has gone to kill people in this movie, but he's got to have some suspicion that it doesn't matter how much he death-proofs a place, death can simply make shit happen.
Of course he has suspicions, because he ran to the closet to keep the door closed, as well as the measures he went to death-proofing the cabin. He realises, of course, there may still be things that could get him, like loose ash, an electrical plug and a water spill, or something falling through the window, but the real issue here is that he assumed he was next on the list after Billy, but we'll get to that later.
She was there a minute ago.
You guys were peeping into a teenage girl's bedroom?
Normally I would agree, but they're FBI, tracking Alex. They have to have some form of surveillance since there's no CCTV set up there.
First it asked me to change seats, but I never moved.
Alex is about to use this reasoning to change up what the order of the deaths should be, but it doesn't make any sense. He did move in the premonition, and even if he was able to do something differently if he had stayed on the plane, he didn't, and one would assume that Krista and Blake would have been sitting in the back now that Alex's seat was available. So clearly Death's roadmap is based on the premonition, and not what happened after.
Aren't you supposed to be hyper-observant? When Alex woke up, he was in his original seat with Krista and Blake asking him to switch. Since he didn't in real life, the order of the deaths was muddled up in Alex's mind, making him think that Clea was the last one on the list when it was actually him. Not to mention that throughout the rest of the franchise, the Visionary is always the last one to die, at least until Bloodlines changed the rules a little. The point is, since Alex didn't actually move in real life, he was the last in line. And if you were really clever, you'd have pointed out that the blood splatter on Alex's face, when Terry was run over, looked like a number 7, which is meant to be a reference to him being the 7th and therefore final person in the lineup. The real sin should be that Alex mucked up the order here.
I never moved. Clear seat was in front of mine. She's next.
This diagram suggests that tiny explosions happened in specific seats first, and completely avoiding anyone sitting next to those seats. Then the huge explosion happened that later killed everyone who wasn't already dead from front to back, in that very specific order. How the f*** do you accurately determine the order from this bullshit?
Because the explosion happened in the fuel line, and as we see in the premonition, Todd gets whacked over the head with a radio, then Terry was splattered all over the cabin, then the big fireball happened which, in order, took out Val Lewton, Carter, Billy, Clear, and then Alex. And since he saw all of that in the premonition, it would be easy for him to work out the order. His issue was figuring out what was happening, why it was happening, and who would be next if the theory was true. After that, the only thing he had to worry about after that was how to keep everyone safe.
If Alex is next, then why wouldn't Death attempt to kill him while he's running through a forest? Or tipped over his canoe and caused him to drown?
So you're not paying attention to the movie. He just had the realization that he wasn't actually next, Clear is. Meanwhile, Death is busy harassing Clear with a down power line, so he might have had his hands full with that to even attempt to pursue Alex.
Honestly, with the tree falling on Alex and the crazy live wire flipping out at Clear's house, I'm not sure why neither of these kids are dead yet. If Death wanted to kill somebody, they'd have done it by now. Nobody's been saved or pushed out of the way or anything that could cheat Death, so what gives?
Well, Alex isn't because it's not his turn yet, and Clear isn't because she's actively trying to run away. As for the he would have done it already comment, Death in this universe loves to toy with his victims, lead them into a false sense of security, misdirect, and all sorts of things to give them a bizarre or gruesome death. Going too quickly would just be boring for Death himself and the audience, as well as remove the need for Alex to try and save people, because he won't have the time to do so.
When I do this, it'll skip you and it'll all be over.
Death allows this conversation to happen.
And now we're back to narrating what we see on the screen.
I realize this sounds redundant in this franchise, but Alex survives this.
Refer to the previous sin about narration. And yes, he brings this up later when he's in Paris with Carter and Clear.
So wait, Clear and Alex are just cool with Carter now? So much so that a mere 6 months later, they go on a whole-ass trip to Paris with him? Carter was never cool in this movie. Was never their friend, and man, he must have done a 180 during those 6 months for this to happen. And yes, Carter himself brings up how weird it is later, but
oh my god, who the hell cares?
It's weird being here, huh?
Did the FBI just give up on trying to arrest Alex for those weird deaths? Like, it makes sense they couldn't pin all of them to him, but the Miss Luton one had his fingerprints on a knife and his bloody footprints in the house. I guess if you survive death like Alex does, the FBI just leaves you alone for murders you may have committed.
My guess is that after seeing Alex trying to rescue Clear, doing CPR on him, and hearing that Carter was still alive, they ended up concluding that the death theory was most likely true and let him off. Or he was likely held for a few months until further evidence was gathered, and since they wouldn't have been able to find anything else, they might have let him go.
And now Clear will conveniently see a vision of a bus that is about to hit Alex, because while Death has a design, it likes to challenge itself.
Jeremy, are you narrating again?
Kind of a nice touch that the 180 from this sign nearly kills Alex. Hardly any of the other deaths had anything this clever going on, but they saved one for the end. Anyway, here's a sin for that.
Whoa, 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 whoa. None of the deaths were clever? Todd's was made to look like a suicide, Miss Luton's, despite being drawn out, was made to look like a murder took place, and Billy got the top of his head cut off by loose debris from the car wreckage. I will admit, Terry being run over by a bus, while shocking, was still mostly overplayed in other mediums, but the rest of these had some creative merit.
Just get me. So who's next?
It's okay, Alex. I probably wouldn't bother to tell him either.
Because they both realised what was about to happen to Carter and that there was no chance of survival for him. So why bother? And with that, court is adjourned. Be sure to leave any recommendations for Cinema Sins down below, and I will see you in the next video.